In its latest defence plan, the Irish government indicated that it is considering buying new jet fighters to provide for the country's air defence needs. That's a bit unusual because the last dedicated fighter aircraft the country had were a few Supermarine Seafire aircraft that were retired in 1955. As a neutral country, Ireland has never really seen the need for air defence fighters, until recently. For the last decade, Ireland has experienced regular probing of its airspace by Russian bombers. In fact, these are mainly aimed at testing the British Royal Air Force's defences by trying to slip in through the back door, so to speak. These intrusions have also presented a threat to civilian air traffic and caused a lot of disruption. The Irish and Brits have had an accord where the RAF deal with such intruders, but that has caused issues in Ireland, kind of understandable considering the history between the two countries. So the Irish are now looking at taking care of their own air defence. Now, to be honest, the cost of setting up their own interceptor fleet and all that goes along with that means that I really don't think that this will ever happen. But that doesn't stop us playing top trumps and considering which aircraft they would go for. Any aircraft would need to have a focus on air interception, as the Irish don't really need ground strike capability. And as they would be operating primarily over water, reliability would be key, so perhaps a twin-engine design would be preferred. However, the plane selected wouldn't need to be of cutting-edge capability. Its job, after all, is just to get Russian bears and blackjacks loitering over the Atlantic to behave themselves. And cost, as always, is going to be critical. Obvious favourites would be an older legacy aircraft, which might be available cheap on the second-hand market, helping to minimise those horrible initial outlays that will probably kill this program before it starts anyway. For this, an American design is most likely, given the cultural and historic bonds between Ireland and the United States, plus the fact that the US has a vast fleet of surplus older aircraft sitting in storage depots that can be offered up cheap with some reworking. So what are the contenders? The F15 Eagle. Though the F-15 is perfectly designed for long-range interception, and there are large numbers of old aircraft sitting in boneyards that could be sold, the aircraft is probably a bit more than the Irish need. Costs of running the Eagle would be high for a huge amount of capability that would be largely surplus to requirement. The F18 Hornet. Or, perhaps, Canada's variant of it, the CF118. These are planned to be retired in the near future, and maybe the Irish could pick up a few, plus spares, for a bargain. And Canada's Hornets have been defending the long northern borders from the same Russian intruders that are vexing the Irish. But these aircraft are still complex, and their age is definitely a problem. Canada's issues with getting a replacement aircraft into service, which incidentally I've done a video on, link will be at the end, mean that they've had to buy up Australia's old F-18s for parts and are spending a lot of money keeping these old fighters in the air. The F16 Falcon. Out of the legacy options, the F-16 is probably the best bet. A whole bunch of nations are in the process of replacing these with newer aircraft and are probably amenable to doing a deal. Plus the USAF have so many in storage they're turning them into unmanned drones to shoot down. So a competent air interceptor which is still in widespread service and likely to be around for quite a while, with a large stock of aircraft parts and airframes to choose from. The F-16 is probably the best choice out of the legacy aircraft. There are a couple of wild cards though. The F5 Tiger. If the Irish had been making this choice back in the 70s or 80s, it would have been easy. The F5 was designed to be cheap to buy, cheap to operate, reliable and simple. Exactly what the Irish want. Of course, these aircraft are old now, some having been in service for 40 or 50 years. But the existing airframes that are in service have proven capable of service life extension and upgrading. And like the F-16, a number of operators are in the process of replacing them in service currently. Both Korea and Switzerland operate aircraft that fall into this category, and may be happy to sell them off cheap. Though the F-5s would probably need replacing after a short period due to their age, they could be a useful starter fighter for the Irish Air Corps. The Kfir. A bit unlikely, but still a possibility, the Israeli Kfir is now offered as a complete rebuild. This means that buyers get essentially a brand new and highly capable multi-role aircraft at a pretty good price, and a few nations have jumped at the chance. But again, although it would certainly be capable of the mission, the Kfir would probably be a little too much aircraft for the Irish needs and budget. Of course, the issue with a legacy aircraft is that these old airframes will only have a limited number of flight hours left on them before they need replacing or major overhaul, which, as the Canadians are finding, can be a huge drain on a defence budget. So if, and it's a big if mind, the Irish decide to go for a new aircraft, what are the options? The Dassault Rafale and Eurofighter. Arguably the premier fighters offered by the European defence industry. I think we can write these off. Though both excellent aircraft, they are hugely expensive as a result. The Eurofighter might have something going for it with compatibility with the British, who may be willing to do a deal, especially on fleet support, for a sale. But it seems unlikely it'll ever be cheap enough. The Saab Gripen. An aircraft that is proving popular with buyers on a budget, the Gripen has the lowest operational costs of any of the modern Western fighters, but still provides a hell of a lot of bang for the buck. And the Swedes have proven very flexible on their terms of sale. Plus, as another neutral country, a Gripen purchase could avoid political objections to a purchase. To be honest, if I was making the call and cost wasn't a concern, the Gripen would be my favourite option. But cost is a concern, and that means we should look at a few oddballs. The JF17 Thunder. This Chinese fighter is a bit of an enigma, and there are some doubts in the West as to just how capable it is as a fighter aircraft. However, that doesn't really matter to the Irish, who, as pointed out, need something with a good turn of speed, a bit of range, that they can hang a couple of short-range missiles off to escort naughty Russians. The Thunder can do all that handsomely, and it is possible that the Chinese would offer very nice terms as a way of getting some influence in Ireland, a tactic they use in other countries. That fact has probably put off a few sales to Western-leaning nations, but the Irish may not be too concerned about that if it means picking up a capable interceptor at bargain basement prices. The Supersonic Trainers. As pointed out, the Irish don't need a latest in radar, electronics or weaponry for the role they want fulfilled, so they may opt for one of the new fighter trainers coming out onto the market. Aircraft like the KAI T-50, Air Mackie M346 or the new American T-7A Red Hawk all offer the possibility of reasonable range, good speed and a basic air intercept capability that is more than enough for the Irish needs. And truth be told, if the Air Corps does get a new aircraft to defend Irish airspace, one of these is the most likely to be chosen. But there is another option now, an interesting one that may become the choice for smaller nations like Ireland, who don't have the established expertise or infrastructure for air defence, and don't want to invest the capital necessary to acquire it. Air defence, after all, is a bit of a one-trick pony. So they could subcontract it. Hear me out. There are a number of companies that operate high-performance fighter aircraft under contract, normally in a training role. They employ experienced former fighter pilots and operate retired, but still very capable fighter aircraft, normally in the aggressor role for air forces to practice against. As a few examples, Draken International operate both the Atlas Cheetah fighter and Mirage F1s. Tactical Air Support Inc. operates upgraded F5s, whilst ATAC, which is part of defence giant Textron, operates 63 F1 Mirages. That makes them larger than a number of air forces. These are just three of a number of companies that could theoretically protect Irish airspace under contract, and that would free up the Irish from building the necessary expertise and infrastructure needed to operate high-performance aircraft. The contractors would supply it. In today's world of outsourcing, that could well be the most efficient and cheapest option. Well folks, that wraps up this video. Hopefully you found it interesting, and if so, please drop a like, and also I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments on the subject. Some of my other videos have had some really good discussions, and I hope that these videos provide an avenue for debate. And if you want to support the channel, please consider buying my book Desert Sniper, which is about my time fighting ISIS in Syria. Links are in the description. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you again.